April the 29th, 2021. Roll call and posting of the agenda. And I'd like to share, Madam Clerk, that Councilwoman Basua is going to be joining us later on, probably about 5:45, 6 p.m.
Yes, Mayor.
Mhm.
Councilmember, Councilmember, Councilmember Madrigal,
Here.
Councilmember Perrello,
Here.
Councilmember Turan,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem McDonald,
Here.
Mayor Zaragoza.
Here,
Thank you.
thank you.
And I'm here too.
And Councilman Lopez,
Lopez.
And Councilmember Lopez?
yes.
Here.
Thank you. The agenda for this meeting was posted in the City Hall Bulletin Board on April 19th, 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, and we don't have any public comments on this item. So our next item is closed session, and this is conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, government code 5495, 9.9D for Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll read that over again since
Thank you.
the number got tripped up a little bit.
Okay,
The City Council will recess to a closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, Subdivision D4, based on existing facts and circumstances to decide whether to initiate litigation in one potential case.
thank you, and we'll return at 6 p.m. for the regular meeting. We're going into closed session. Thank you. And before we start our 6 o'clock ceremonial item, we just got back from closed session. Mr. City Attorney, do we have any announcements?
Thank you, Mayor Zaragoza. There are no reports of action out of closed session this evening.
Thank you so much. And of course, then we have appointment item D. It's going to be at 7 to 9 p.m. and that'll happen at 7 o'clock. So let's go ahead and start with the opening ceremonies, and before we have the Pledge of Allegiance. And before we do that, I'd like to share that I'd like to ask all of us to have a moment of silence for Pedro Valdez. Pedro Valdez was a cyclist that was run down. Unfortunately, he was one out of 7 cyclists that was run down on Ventura Road in Port Hueneme just a few days ago. In fact, that was about April the 20th. So we want to give our sincere condolences to his family this evening. And additionally, I also want to thank our fire department, because today we had some firefighter graduates and promotions that were promoted this morning. And we want to thank all our firefighters for keeping us safe, and thank them again and congratulate them for that. So with that in mind, again, we'll have a moment of silence, and please join me with a salute to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Okay. Our next item is public comments, items not on the agenda. And I have 3 speakers I'd like to speak today. And the first speaker is going to be Luciano Morales, followed by Johnny Garcia, and then Paul Watley. Luciano Morales. Madam Clerk.
Luciano Morales.
Mhm.
Mr. Morales.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for having me. I represent Go Transportation. We're a micromobility company founded and based in Oxnard, and we seek to reduce public dependence on cars by offering an affordable, accessible, and sustainable form of personal transportation with GOAT-branded e-scooters. To achieve this, Go Transportation is committed to working with the city to provide affordable and safe shared electric scooters and bikes for public use. Go is experienced in the market and has operated in over 30 markets, each locally owned and operated by people who walk the same streets each day. Go empowers local fleet owners to benefit directly from their vehicles in their cities. We operate from a community-first perspective, and our intent is to collaborate in an open and productive partnership with the city of Oxnard and the businesses and community that operate and live here. GOAT platform and hardware can fit in any model you're interested in, from docked, dockless, and hybrid features. Our hardware can support Lock 2 devices for docks, corrals, and helmets. And our leading software can allow use to make unlimited and precise geofence zones for parking, restricted zones, speed zones, and even custom zones. And we can also support unlimited in-app promotions for local businesses, city announcements, and more. Finally, we have end-of-ride photos to ensure scooter parking compliance. And if the city requests, we can provide public data and reports for pilot data tracking. And our goal is to provide an equitable shared mobility scooter program that provides fast and green options to help residents and visitors reach local businesses and neighborhoods across Oxnard and the surrounding areas safely, more easily, and with limited impact on the environment. Launching GOAT with the community-first approach means that we'll implement comprehensive community education and marketing strategy, one that incorporates outreach to local institutions, serving the general public and local neighborhood associations. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Luciano, and I don't get lucky, I get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Luciano. Our next speaker is Johnny Garcia, followed by Paul Whaley.
Mayor, our next two speakers are not available at this time.
Johnny Garcia is not, or Wiley? Okay, they're not. Okay. Well, we can pick them up probably later. Thank you so much. Okay, our next item then is, this is a report of the city manager, and this is a COVID-19 update from Director of Emergency Services. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'll be very brief tonight
Thank you.
because we have extensive updates on the Tuesday meetings, but I just want to remind everyone, although everything is looking better, we are still officially in the pandemic. So please just continue to follow the various guidances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Our next item is item H, and this is City Council members would like to share any announcements or any reports, and also if you have any agenda items you'd like to schedule for the future. Council members? Okay. Council member Madrigal, and also Enturan. Madrigal first.
Yes, real quickly, President Mano, I want to thank everyone that was out at Colonial Park this past weekend to continue helping with Eastside Little League. Also, this past weekend, I was involved with the virtual 5K for the Ought to Run fundraiser. It's a great experience. It was great partnering up with San Miguel School here in the city of Oxnard. And as always, I want to thank the Oxnard Police Department for their autism awareness all month long during April. And then lastly, I know that we are still going through the pandemic. And unfortunately, just today, we do have to remember that, this area is very dry. So, I actually had my soccer practice canceled because of a brush fire. We are in the season. There was 2 brush fires in the East County just today. So as always, unfortunately, that's another thing that we have to, deal with living in the area. So please be careful. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Council Member Turan.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to echo the sentiment that was shared at the top of this meeting after the flag salute, and a moment of silence for the young man who lost his life in the bicycle, the crash that happened. I know what I want to call it, but I'll say the crash. And I just want to send my condolences to his family and the loved ones. And Pedro Valdez, this has come to this council a number of times about bicycle safety. I know this happened in Wainimi, but and this was seemingly, potentially an intentional act, but it's very difficult to hear of any loss of life on our streets for our pedestrians, our cyclists, or our motorists, but especially so when it's someone so young who was out with their friends and cycling, and was well known for cycling and doing it as a positive activity. So I just wanted to take the moment to express my condolences to his family and loved ones. And thank you for the moment of silence for him in his honor, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Council Member Perello.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to bring the public to a little bit up to speed. I had the opportunity as the alternate for the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency to attend the most recent meeting. There is very strong disagreements on parties. We don't know which way it's going to go, but I feel very comfortable, and I'd like to report to the rest of the councilmen that we have Deputy City Manager Ms. Klima handling this and doing one heck of a job. getting our points across, and she's getting support from areas. Some areas are very intransigent. They won't budge. And there's a famous saying in the West, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. And it may come down to that. I hope not, because a lot of time and money in labor fees and lawyer fees and time wasted. The city has proposed a very positive suggestion. I hope it gets a lot more traction. The second thing, this Saturday, I had the opportunity, along with Councilman Turan, the Ventura County Watershed Protection individual, Gerard Kapusik, offered to take him and show him the SCR1 issues, what's going on with the levy program. And we spent a few hours going over that and felt it was very worthwhile. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I would like to share, I just want to thank Chief Benitez, for working over in the Colonial Park this last weekend, and numerous other Oxnard PD officers, and of course our laborers, our carpenters, and also my understanding is that there's a landscaping company from Camarillo that's going to meet with Chris Hernandez, or met with Chris Hernandez today, regarding potentially helping us with some sod over at the Colonial Park. So the Colonial Park is really coming alive, and I just want to thank everybody for their excellent work too, and also our Parks Department for coming up with water. My understanding is they did not have any water in their place there for the longest time, and now they have water, which is really, really fantastic. So with that in mind, everybody keep safe, and again, thank you so much. Okay, our next item, and this is a City Manager Department item, is appointment of a member to serve the City Planning Commission. And the recommendation is the mayor, with the concurrence of the City Council, make a following appointment to the Planning Commission, Mr. Steve Nash from District 1. And before we continue, again, Ms. Klima probably has some information on that. We do have a speaker on that, and that is Armando Delgado.
Mayor, Armando Delgado is not available at the moment. However, Johnny Garcia, regarding public comments on items not on the agenda, is on the line.
Okay, let's go ahead. Well,
The public speaker for this item, Armando Delgado, is not currently available.
okay, we'll finish this item and then we'll call Johnny Garcia.
Sure.
So again, this is with the concurrence of the mayor, the City Council, make the appointment for Mr. Steve Nash. And do we have, Mr. Klima, do we have any additional information for Mr. Nash?
No, that's it. Just thank him. We just want to thank him on behalf of staff for offering to serve.
Oh, okay, let me see. So we have Councilman Perello and then Councilmember Madrigal. And of course, and Turan. I'm sorry. And Mayor Pro Tem also. In that order. So Perello?
Who goes? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
There have been some questions asked about my appointment, some concerns from organized labor. And I'd like to share with the public the reason that I feel very proud to place Mr. Nash's name in nomination for this position to represent District 1. Number one, Mr. Nash served on the Planning Commission for 6 years, did a tremendous job, highly recommended by staff, both legal and development services and fellow commissioners. Number two, a little background on Mr. Nash. 43 years married to the same wonderful woman, Mary, 3 children, grandchildren, 31-year former employee for the city of Oxnard, member of the Operating Engineers International, all of those times, heavily involved in his union activities, a blue-collar working man. He's currently involved in more union activity in the SEIU with the obligations that he's taken upon himself. He served 4 years on the Parks and Rec Commission meeting. He happens to be a college graduate, University of California system. He is known for, sometimes the questions apparently come because of environmental concerns. I've seen Mr. Nash on many occasions with his hat and his shorts and a stick in a bag picking up the trash at our city parks, working as a volunteer picking up trash at Ormond Beach, never once asking for personal acknowledgement. It's the type of guy he is. The type of a guy that reads the paperwork, knows what he's talking about, is willing to discuss with anyone, does not have a closed mind, as some may think. A man that understands what it means to be a working man or woman, working to put food on your table, working to create a good city for his family and all those families he does not know. He served on the executive committee for the INCO. He served on the ethics committee. He has served on the AYSO youth things. So we had a little mention earlier about youth and sports, years as a coach and years as a referee. He happens to be on his homeowners association. One of the biggest things that I can say about Mr. Nash, he believes in accountability on himself and on others. The Planning Commission is a state of California constitutional position. That's one of the reasons we're going to be in this Brown Act, because they're an appointed position, but they have extreme responsibility. And one of their responsibilities is to be prepared when you go to the meetings. I can know that I can sleep well knowing Mr. Nash, whatever the vote may be, went into that meeting prepared, doing the best job that he can, not for personal gain, for the betterment of the city of Oxnard. And I want to thank him for offering again to serve this city that he's lived in and continues to live in. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Teran, followed by Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I'm willing to speak, but just to be fair, Mayor Pro Tem did have his hand up before mine. Just want to throw that out there and make that offer. I see him shaking his head. Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I'm not in any rush. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I just thank you, Councilmember Perello, for saying those words about Mr. Nash. And I have to say that hearing that there are statements or questions or concerns about Mr. Nash is important, because that's what our system is set up for people to be able to have their say on who they want representing them, even in appointed positions. And I just want to say that after hearing these concerns, I certainly am thankful for people for reaching out about them and putting my own thought into it. I have to reflect a lot of what Councilmember Perello has said. And just from my own observation and serving with Mr. Nash as a commissioner on the Parks, Recreation, Community Services Commission, I found him to be thoughtful, and he is fair on the dais. And I have to believe that in his previous experience as a former planning commissioner, as being involved in his union activities as an employee of the city in the past, and everything that he does now, I have to say that I see that he could absolutely, as a planning commissioner, as is his charge, set aside his own personal politics, his own personal ideas, and look at what's going on in front of the Planning Commission from an objective lens, and be able to make a decision that benefits the majority of Oxnard residents as best that he can. And so I just wanted to share that I appreciate him once again stepping up to serve in another voluntary role. And I certainly hope that he will take this this appointment, and if it goes, if it's passed by council, he'll take it seriously. I have little doubt that he will not take it seriously. But know that if people rightfully so have questions about the performance that any of us are doing, that's why we're here, to hear about that. So thank you again, Mr. Nash, for stepping up. And I look forward to how the vote goes with our council. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Donald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too received a variety of phone calls over the last day or so. And I recognize all of the good things that Mr. Nash has done for the city as an employee, as a volunteer, being on Planning Commission, INCO. And it's been difficult for me because the people I talk to say that they're uncomfortable with him being a planning commissioner, and they gave a lot of reasons, but I don't want to sit here and browbeat anybody. So I'm just say that, there are people out there that have concerns. And I know that Mr. Mash is very intelligent and certainly intelligent enough to understand that people are watching all of us, even as electeds. We're often scrutinized. So I was urged not to support him. I'm still not convinced which way I'm going to go. I'll hear the rest of council and might make a final decision. I know that in the past, he's been very diligent in his work. I appreciate that. He reads his material. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And as Councilmember Turan said, it's a matter of arriving at a decision that best suits the needs of the community of Oxnard, which I think is the most important asset. So, but I did have to make those comments that I did receive a lot of concerns. So we'll see which way this takes us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much. And I also receive some comments on that too, but my understanding is that Mr. Nash is really a labor individual that's worked with labor for years and years and years. And my understanding again is that he's very diligent in reading all the materials and providing input that's beneficial to the community. So at this time, we, like I said, we do have that the mayor, in concurrence with the city council, make a following appointment to the planning commission of Mr. Stephen Nash. Do we have a second?
I second it.
Okay, okay, do you have any additional comments, Mayor Pro Tem?
I'm sorry, sir.
Yeah, any additional
Oh,
comments?
No, I'm sorry. I forgot to take my hand
I
down.
see
I'm
the
not
little
used.
hand there.
Yeah, technology is killing me. I apologize.
We got first and a second, roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem McDonald,
Yes.
Councilmember Perrello,
Yes.
Councilmember Basua, Councilmember Madrigal,
Aye.
Mayor Zaragoza,
Yes.
Councilmember Turan,
Yes.
Councilmember Lopez.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 6-0.
And Madam Clerk, I understand that Councilwoman Basu is going to join us later.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, item L is a review of the information consent agenda item. And I don't have any public comments on that item, but we do have one item, and that's the Housing Department. This is the second amendment to the professional services agreement with the New City America. And the recommendation that the City Council approve and authorize the mayor to execute the second amendment to the professional service agreement with New City America, number 8525-19-CM, amending the scope of services for fiscal year 21-22 and extending the term to June 30th, 2022. And the cost for the third year of the agreement is not to exceed $95,000. And we do have our contact person is Emilio Ramirez. Do you have any questions from council members at this time? None? Okay, we need a motion.
Move approval.
Move approval from Councilwoman Lopez,
I'll second.
second by Councilmember Turan. Roll call.
Mayor Zaragoza,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem McDonald,
Yes.
Councilmember Perrello,
Yes.
Councilmember Lopez,
Yes.
Councilmember Madrigal.
Aye.
Councilmember Turan.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you so much. And then our next item is a public hearing, First Amendment, for the Regional Consolidated Plan for the CARES Act funds and the Second Amendment of 2020 Annual Action Plan. And the recommendation is the City Council, number one, conduct a public hearing to receive public comments relating to the following documents to be submitted to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, Office of Community Planning and Development. And A, the First Amendment of the 2020-2024 Ventura County Regional Consolidated Plan for the Oxnard CARES Act funds. And B, Second Amendment to the 2020 Annual Action Plan for the purpose of adding $352,000 to the homeless shelter improvement at 1450 South Rose Avenue. And number two, to approve the First Amendment to the 2020-2024 Ventura County Regional Consolidated Plan for the CARES Act funds of $8,343,372 by funding CDBG-CV resources and $3,088,367 ESG-CVC resources and $5,255,005 to the goals of the COVID pandemic resource activities. And number three, to approve the Second Amendment to the 2020 Action Plan to add $352,000 to homeless shelter facilities improvement costs at 1450 South Rose Avenue to include prior resources remaining from 2019 Homeless Shelter Facilities Fund of $352,000 of the project cost of 1450 South Rose Avenue. And fourth, to authorize the city manager to execute the required application certifications and other permanent documents for the submission of the First Amendment of the Ventura County Regional Consolidated Plan and the Second Amendment of the 2020 Action Plan to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. And five, to authorize the city manager to incorporate any recommendations and changes resulting from the public input to the First Amendment of the Ventura County Regional Consolidated Plan and Second Amendment to the 2020 Annual Action Plan as directed by the City Council, including amending any budget and appropriations approved by the City Council. And we start with the city clerk's certification and publication in any written communications, if any, Madam Clerk.
Mayor, there was a legal notice for this public hearing published in the Ventura County Vita newspaper on March 25th, 2021. And the city clerk's office received one written communication on this item and has been forwarded to council for their consideration.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And the Housing Director, Mr. Ramirez, in accordance with Measure M, posted a video presentation regarding this item and is available to answer any brief clarifying questions. Council members, do we have any before we have any public testimony, any questions at this time? Okay, if not, then I'm going to open this public hearing, and we have any testimony, Madam Clerk?
I believe there's one public speaker,
One public speaker on this item.
Pat Brown, I think.
Yes. Ms. Pat Brown?
Ms. Pat Brown is not available at the moment.
Okay, then if not, I'm closing this public hearing. Council members, do we have any staff or any comments regarding staff? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve this item.
I would move the recommended action.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, we've got a first. Do we need a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Lopez. Roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem McDonald,
Aye.
Councilmember Perrello,
Yes.
Councilmember Lopez,
Yes.
Mayor Zaragoza,
Yes.
Councilmember Madrigal,
Okay, thank you. That's,
Councilmember Madrigal,
I'm sorry.
Aye.
Councilmember Turan,
Yes.
Councilmember, okay, thank you. Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Our next item is a Community Development Department. The subject is to renew the City of Oxnard 2021-2029 Draft Housing Element and General Plan and the amendment to Housing Element Update Planning and Zoning Permit number 20-620-03. And the recommendation of the City Council, one, receive a presentation on the 2021-29 Draft Housing Element, 6-cycle housing element. And also, number two is to provide input of the new Planning Commission recommended draft housing element program and the recommendation of the Committee Services, Public Safety, Housing and Development Committee. And 3, submit a draft housing element to the State of California Housing and Community Development Department, ACD, Community Service, Public Service, Housing and Development Committee. And by the way, that was approved by the Development Committee 2-1. Any questions on this item? We did have a Measure M pre-recorded presentation. And of course, we have Mr. Vito to answer any questions.
And we
And
do
of course,
have,
we also have some speakers.
right, we do have 6 speakers.
We have 6 speakers, and we'll start off with the speakers on this item. And we have, the first speaker is Alexander Russell, followed by Jackson Piper. Alexander Russell, 3 minutes.
Alexander Russell is not available at this time. Jackson Piper is also not available at this time.
Okay, and Clyde Reynolds, followed by Maria Navarro. Clyde Reynolds.
Mr. Clyde Reynolds.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Reynolds, you have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
I'm sorry, my phone, I thought I had to call in, so I've never done this before, so if you can give me 1 second. Honorable Mayor and City Council members, my name is Clyde Reynolds. I'm currently the chairperson of the Vulnerable Populations Housing and Advocacy Network. We're advocating for creating significantly more housing for extremely low and very low income persons. There is a critical need for housing for this group of individuals, the extremely low and very low income persons. While Oxnard produced more low income units than any of the other municipals in the county, it is also true that there was significantly less very low income units produced in Oxnard, only 10.6% of their RENA allocation. This critical need requires more aggressive policies to provide more opportunities for low-income housing developers. We appreciate the recommendations of the April 13th committee to participate in the Farm Worker Housing Study, the County Land Trust, and the Create an Annual Housing Element Workshop. But we believe it's important that there be 2 other recommendations that we made that we'd like to comment on. First is we'd like to request that there be changes to the inclusive housing policy. We understand that the housing element states that in December 2022, the city will update their housing requirements. And so we urge the city to increase the inclusionary housing requirement from 15% up to 20% across all residential development and rental and for sale, modeled after the city of Oxnard's inclusionary ordinance. And I can provide more information about that, but I don't want to take the time to go into the specifics of that. However, we think it's important that this be done so that the actual number of units that are required in the inclusive policy be actually developed or constructed. Currently, what we understand is that most of the developers default to providing an in lieu fee. That in lieu fee is not high enough to actually produce those same number or percentage of units, and therefore they don't result in those units actually being constructed. Our recommendation is that in lieu fee be significantly increased to the level where it would actually produce a unit of service, a unit of housing for each unit that's required from a project. If that's not done, we would urge that the council recommend that there be no in lieu fee so that the developer would actually have to produce that unit which is required by their project. The other recommendation we have is that there be an affordable housing zoning overlay program. We understand that under program 30 and 31, due to government codes requiring that the vacant
30 seconds.
those previous sites that were noted but not done in the previous years would be allowed to be zoned and divided by right. We're asking that this also now apply to all of the sites that are being listed in the housing element, and that this overlay zone also provide by right for those properties, and would then make them also available to be.
Time is up.
Thank you. Next speaker, before we continue, I'd like to share that Councilwoman Basua has joined us. Our next speaker is Maria Navarro, followed by Paul Sheehan. Maria Navarro.
Mayor, our next two speakers are not available.
Okay, then we have Barbara Mackey Ortiz, followed by Armando Delgado.
Mayor, the next two speakers are not available to speak.
Ortiz or Delgado?
That is correct.
Okay. So, so we have Councilmember Perrella, and followed by Councilwoman Lopez.
I think I heard that the committee report was a 2-to-1 vote. Is that correct? Because I think the staff indicates it was a 3-0 vote. And if it was a 2-to-1 vote, what was the dissension reason for the no vote?
Madam Clerk, do you have that? The staff, can you answer that?
Yes, it was a 2-to-1 vote. Councilman Madrigal voted no on the topic. We are prepared to address any of the questions if Councilman Madrigal would like to give an overview of that. But at the end, it was a 2-to-1 with a recommendation to include 3 new programs, which were brought before you this evening.
Okay, and if the council member is willing to share, I'm interested, but then the staff report needs to be corrected. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Councilman Tehran.
Oh, I believe Councilmember Lopez was next.
It's okay. You can go ahead.
Oh, thank you. All right. Thank you very much for the putting all this together. This is, just to clarify, this is the next version of the draft that will be going for submission. And then there will be responses that we get from the state. Is that correct? And then will the public have another opportunity in the next version of the draft to provide input based on the input we get from the state? And I don't know if Ms. Mallory will answer that or Mr. Ramirez.
Sure, Councilmember Tran, after council takes action this evening, we'll forward the draft to HCD and then they will give us input within 60 days. The input will then be reviewed and we'll have discussions with the housing advocacy groups committee and then bring it back to council.
Thank you. So there will be future opportunities for additional members of the public to view this, review it, and chime in on it, correct?
That's correct, Councilmember.
Great, thank you. And then my last question, I see we have some planning commissioners here tonight as well. When this went before the planning commission moved it forward with a recommendation for the committee, the council committee, to review potential inclusion of a rental stabilization and just cause portion to this housing element. And as I recall, the committee decided not to include that. And I'm just hoping that staff can maybe bring the public up to speed on where that stands now after it not moving forward beyond council committee.
Councilmember, before I respond to the other programs mentioned in the Planning Commission action, if Mr. Ramirez would like to address the rent stabilization issue.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Emilio Ramirez, Housing Director. As a result of the presentations before City Council in the previous several months by the community led by a group called Cause, the city manager asked me to engage with Cause and the community to consider the proposals that they're bringing forth for rent control and just cause. I have initiated that effort with Cause and the community. I've had several meetings with Cause and the community and continue that effort. Right now, we are in the midst of considering what programs we would present including potentially an ordinance or a program to enforce and enact the state law. We're preparing to bring forth to council committee in July and then to full city council in the fall. We are not yet at a final assent relative to the type of ordinance, the structure of the ordinance, the structure of the program, or which part or not comes before the city council. So we have quite a bit of work to do still and are continuing engaging with the community.
Councilmember, additionally, the Planning Commission recommended 3 new programs. One was as a result of robust and good community input. One was a yearly annual report. We think that's a good idea. We already do a yearly annual report, but they recommended, the commission and the community recommended, an annual report workshop with the public. We think that's a good idea, so we're recommending the inclusion of that new program. Additionally, the Planning Commission and community raised the issue of our participation in the Ventura County housing study to look at and survey to look at farm worker housing. So there is that new program we're recommending, along with participation in the Ventura County Housing Trust Fund program. We are recommending 3 new programs. Additionally, those would be new. We are recommending the identification of new funding sources for those 2 county programs, and we can do the lift on the community workshop on the annual workshop. So that's not an added cost.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Ramirez, and Ms. Mallory answers all of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lopez, followed by Councilmember Madrigal. Lopez.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to acknowledge, I'm glad to see, the engagement from our community and the recommendations coming forward, especially around the farm worker housing study that I think would be great to participate in and further study that, and as well as the local preference that I think would be a great benefit to our city. So I'm glad to see that also moving forward. The question I had to the appropriate staff to answer is if you can explain what the difference is and the transition in the recommendation of going from the AHOP to the state default density, and where that change comes from.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mayor, the AHOP program was originally in our last housing element, our current housing element. With that AHOP program, we looked at density and we looked at an analysis of how many units we could accommodate. We utilized and provided justification for a different density than what we're recommending tonight. That was had a range of densities, but it was generally lower than the state's default density. And that's because we believe we had sufficient capacity for units within that range. We also believed that, and our analysis showed that we could justify construction within that range. When we started looking at our projects in some of our specific plan areas, we saw that we could accommodate more density. We also had a larger arena number than we had historically had. We knew that was coming, and the committee and council gave support for utilizing the state's default density. It's of 30 unit of at least 30 units per acre. So we are taking components of the AHOP program. We're recommending the increase of the density to at least 30 units per acre, and we'll be able to meet our arena capacity with that by utilizing the state's default density.
Great, thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilmember Madrigal.
Thank you. Before I begin, I was having some technical issues, so I believe Councilmember Perello had questions concerning the committee meeting.
Yeah, my question was the vote. Why was the reason for the dissent? I'm interested. The reason for the no vote, and they identified in the staff report.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. Real quickly, we do have, as has been mentioned, we do have a high number, 8,549 units in the next 8 years. A couple of things have been fixed from the original presentation that came to committee. One of which is actually slide 12 in the PowerPoint presentation. It concerned Outlet Center Drive parcel and the Ives Avenue. They actually had matching units. So I had issues with a school for the proposed unit on Ives, but it was a mistake on that original presentation and it was fixed and they told me it was supposed to be for senior living. That was one of the things that I brought up. Another on the next slide, slide 13, the Ventura Pacific site, which is in Colonia, which is right off of Oxnard Boulevard and Colonia. My issue, it's 195 units proposed for 6.5 acres. That's probably a little bit under the 30 units an acre, but my issue was in case of an emergency, how's everyone going to get out? Especially because I know that the train does have certain times where they do close off the crossings at Cooper and Colonia Road for maintenance purposes or for other issues concerning on trying to get everything situated there. So I know that sometimes they do get closed off for a variety of 10, 15 minutes. What happens in case of a fire? How's everyone's going to exit since there is only one exit onto Colonia Road? And as it is very impacted. Let's see, anything, but my biggest issue and was the X number or the large proportion of above moderate for the annexation sites that could be found on slide 9 of the PowerPoint presentation. That's roughly about, I would say somewhere above 60%, where all annexation sites, which total about 1,100 units, a little bit over 1,100, about 60% of them are for above moderate housing. And to me, then that just shows I'm sorry, I can't get that word. It shows a lack of equality, I think. I feel that for that particular reason, I don't think that everything's to be equally distributed all along the city. I know that staff and the consultant, they did say that it did meet all criteria, but to me, I don't think it's enough. So I voted for no for that. And that was the main reason I voted no.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay, Councilmember Tehran, you have additional comments?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just very quickly, and it's probably not a big thing, but I'm looking at the staff report and I'm looking at the agenda, and I'm not finding where Councilmember Perillo is saying 3-0. I get up because it's concerned to me if what he has and what I have or what the public may have don't match. So I was just wanting to clarify that. The agenda I have that I got from the city's website, which is the full packet with a staff report, shows 2-1 vote at committee every time that comes up.
It was 2-1 for the committee. Councilman
Councilman Perillo made a mistake.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Mayor, thank you. I just, it wasn't my intention to call out Councilmember Perillo. It's more just, I want to make sure that everything's matching here if this is what's going out to the public. And I know our staff is very diligent about these things, and I just wanted to make sure that that was clear and that what I had was accurate, and if there was an issue that it could be addressed. But I'm glad to hear that. That's a simple solution. Thank you, Councilmember Perillo, for that.
Mayor Zaragoza, can staff take a minute to respond to some of the concerns that Councilman Madrigal brought up?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Mallory, can you please address some of those comments?
Thank you, Ms. Golden. So a couple items that we wanted to address. In terms of the annexation areas that are identified on the supplement and within the housing element, those reflect development projects that are currently underway. Those reflect projects that we have on hand at this point. Certainly those identification of lower income in those areas, the the proposal is that they would comply with our inclusionary housing. If, so for example, on the northerly portion of the city in the Rio Urbana area, that's a development project. If the city had wanted to acquire it in the past and to build affordable housing, it could have done that but the project has been entitled and it is going to provide the required number of affordable housing units. On the Teal Club property, that is, we're not utilizing that property for to meet our lower income obligation. It is a project that would have moderate income and they would be required to comply with the inclusionary ordinance. In terms of the map in the supplement 1, and the identification of the red areas, that map is intended to show lower income units only. And Councilmember Madrigal, you're right. It doesn't necessarily show, from the look of the map, it does look like there's a disparity in where the lower income units are placed. If you look at it, there's not necessarily inclusionary, there's not necessarily lower income units in the northwesterly portion or even the far westerly part of the city. And that's not necessarily that, we're intended to concentrate lower income units just in the center of the town. We're not intending to place lower income away from affordable. We're not intending to place lower income units away from higher income housing. We're not intending to cluster it. We're not intending to segregate and to be discriminatory or cause increased disparities. We are merely, the map before you is a reflection of the methodology dictated by the state. So, what we're talking about is that we have units that are being placed in such a way that took into consideration the state guidelines and the state handbook that says that lower income units should be placed within proximity to transit, that they should be placed near schools, near grocery stores, that should be placed in, should be identified on parcels between a ½ acre and up to 10 acres. And also housing units that are likely to be developed over the next 8 years. So that's what is shown on the map. And we're happy to answer questions that may be provided on that question. So that is the protocol on why we identified those sites.
Mr. Mayor, can I follow up? Ms. Mallory, I'd like to follow up on that.
Mr. City Manager.
Those guidelines from the state, are those guidelines, are those rules, or those requirements?
Sure, I'll start, and if Ms. Sinsheimer would like to provide any additional recommendations. Those are requirements. Those are for us to have our housing elements certified. We have to place affordable housing located on parcels that meet that criteria. We have met cursorily with HCD to have them review the maps and have conversations with them. But what we're looking at is the standards that they give to us. They say that the affordable housing should be located in those locations in order to meet our RENA. If there's any other questions or on that, I'm happy to answer.
Is there any additional questions of Kathleen Mallory? Okay, if none, I personally want to thank, the presentation by staff, on the draft housing element, the 6th cycle. I went to the Planning Commission and we got recommendations from the Planning Commission. And of course, my understanding, this is mandated by HCD, by a specific date from the city of Oxnard. Is that correct?
That is correct. There was one additional item I was hoping to respond to in terms of access for properties near the Lemon, the former Lemon processing facility. And with that project, if and when it comes forward, it would be reviewed through our development advisory process where we check access and circulation. So we would certainly make sure that any project within the city, including something on this site, would be designed in accordance with all of our standards. So I believe those are all the items. In terms of Mayor, And I don't know if Ms. Golden or Mr. Ramirez have anything else to add before I provide. Okay.
Mr. Ramirez, Ashley?
I don't have any, no.
I do not have anything.
Okay.
And just to follow up, Mayor, there is, the action is to approve the housing element and submit it to HCD, Housing and Community Development by October 15th of this year.
Thank you, Kathleen. So that's a recommended motion here. We have items 1, 2, and 3, and 3, I think, is the most important one. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move approval.
Move approval, Councilman Lopez,
Second,
second by Mayor Pro Tem McDonald. Roll call.
Councilmember Basua,
Yes.
Councilmember Madrigal,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem McDonald,
yes.
Councilmember Turan,
Yes.
Councilmember Lopez,
Yes.
Councilmember Perrello,
Yes.
Mayor Zaragoza.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0. Sorry.
No.
Motion passes
No.
6-1.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's correct. By the way, before we adjourn, I think we had a couple of council items. Let me see, who were they? On items not in the agenda. I think Mr. Garcia and Wiley, well, they're still available. If not, we'll adjourn. Two. On this item, we'll adjourn to the 7 o'clock.
Yes, and we also have,
Well, there's two public items not in the agenda.
okay, one moment. Mr. Garcia, Johnny Garcia,
I'm here.
thank you. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay. So, hello. It's a pleasure to be speaking to all of you guys. I'm Johnny Garcia. I'm a business partner with the previous speaker, Luciano Morales, on RideGo. I'd like to start us off with this. According to the International Transport Forum, 60% of all trips are less than 5 miles. 25% of trips are 5 to 15 miles. And 15% of trips are more than 15 miles. Our fleets of scooters have a battery life of 40 miles. If we were to put that into perspective, from the Oxnard shores and to the collection is an approximate of 9.8 miles. Our fleets can make a trip there and back twice off of one charge. Along with this long battery life, our scooters have GPS tracking, bright headlights, a taillight that flashes red to let others behind them know that they are braking, and sensors within the scooter that will be tracked to determine if a scooter has fallen and or could be blocking a sidewalk or pathway. We will message users when we detect a scooter that has tipped within 1 minute of their ride time. If they choose to not comply, our team members will ensure that all scooters within the city are presentable and in optimum working condition to help prevent and not make them problem litter bikes. Our swappable batteries will provide industry-leading on-road lifespan and serviceability so that our scooters are operable 24/7. Implementing these will do a service to Oxnard's community by bringing us a much more safer option of transportation for its people, all while helping reduce carbon emissions because these are 100% electric. Now, we live in a time where people do feel divided. We believe that this will bring our beautiful community together because Go is locally owned and operated. It has in-app features that gives us the ability to work alongside with locally owned businesses in Oxnard. But not only that, but this can allow us to come together and enjoy them as a community. Now, being born and raised in Oxnard, I believe that this has the ability to change Oxnard for the better because we want to build a better Oxnard for those who come after us. Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you. Is Mr. Wiley, is he available?
No, he is not available.
Okay, so then that's going to be the end of the city council portion, and we're right at 7 o'clock according to my computer here. So then we are going to go with the appointment item. It's at 7 o'clock, and this is the introduction of the parliamentary procedure by Mr. James Stewart. And I understand we also have joining us today, we have some members of the Planning Commission. And well, thank you for joining us today, Planning Commissioners, and including all council members. Welcome, and I see a lot of photos up there. Wave your hands, and I see the Chairman of the Planning Commission, Mr. Chavez. So welcome anyway. So we'll go ahead and start with the Mr. Fisher, our city attorney, is going to introduce our speaker today.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is the training session that's required under Oxnard City Code Section 2-1.3B that was codified through voter approval last November, and it requires the members of city legislative bodies to be trained on Robert's Rules of Order by a parliamentarian that's certified as designated in the code section. So tonight's training will be provided by Mr. James Stewart, professional registered parliamentarian, which is the certification given by the National Association of Parliamentarians. Mr. Stewart has held this designation since 1999. This is a 2-hour interactive program that he has designed, and will focus on the use of Robert's Rules for small local government bodies, subject to statutory requirements for the conduct of city business. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Stewart now.
Welcome, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you very much. Everybody can hear me okay, I hope. Okay, let me get to, hold on, what happened to the slideshow? Okay. This is an introduction to parliamentary procedure. As I said, I'm James Stewart, professional registered parliamentarian. Please don't be like the fellow on the left. If you have a question, please put it in the chat room and we will get to all of them toward the end. This is a quote from Kenneth Arrow, who is a Nobel laureate in economics and founder of the field of social choice theory, which is looking at why bodies make decisions the way they do, particularly large bodies, and how does the process affect those decisions. And I emphasize two particular things here. We know that no rule is completely acceptable to everybody all the time, and that these rule-making processes and these decision-making processes sometimes produce paradoxes in the process itself. That's somewhat unavoidable. A colleague of his, Robert Gooden, this is to remind us that the context matters. The context in which you are making the decision is important. That given the same set of facts, if you are doing this in the city of Los Angeles, for example, you might make a different decision than you will in the city of Oxnard. Or if you were making a decision for your local nonprofit association with the same set of facts, you might make a different decision. Context matters. So, what does this stuff called parliamentary procedure do, and why do we use it? Well, it protects the rights of the members and of the minority. And the minority in this case has its simplest definition: any group less than half. Most people think that parliamentary procedure is just to, have some rules for the meeting. But that's a secondary idea. The protection of the rights of the members is the most important part of Robert's Rules of Order, or any set of parliamentary procedure. It gives a decision-making process that can be trusted. Now, here's a scenario for you. 300 registered parliamentarians in a room trying to amend their bylaws. This is the National Association of Parliamentarians Convention. Everybody's trying to show off and outdo each other, and it never works. because everybody knows exactly what to do and knows the counter to the counter to the counter to the counter. It's a very interesting process, but it demonstrates that the process itself, when used properly, cannot be manipulated. And it also provides an effective and efficient and ordered decision-making process. Now, parliamentary procedure is not the only thing you have to deal with. There's other things which we call documents of authority. They include at the federal level, the Constitution, state laws governing cities, your local ordinances and regulations, bylaws of your various subdivisions, policies and special rules of order, standing rules and procedures for meetings, the parliamentary authority, and then your customs and traditions. And each one of those has to be considered when you're putting together your processes so that you take into account all of them. Now, what are special rules of order? Well, special rules are those which your body creates that supersede the parliamentary authority, in this case, Robert's rules, because there are situations that either aren't covered in Roberts, and no book can cover everything, even though it's 600 and some pages, or what's in the book simply doesn't work in your association, your organization, your city. They're adopted by a 2/3 vote of the body, and the 2/3 is because you're changing the rights of members. Anytime you change the rights of members, it requires a 2/3 vote. They're amendable by a 2/3 vote. They are suspendable for a meeting with a 2/3 vote. Again, you come up a situation, the rules aren't working for you, so you suspend that rule and make another rule for that particular meeting. They cannot, of course, violate any laws, nor violate any of the basic rights of the members, or in the case of a city council, the rights of the public. Respectful debate engenders respected decisions. If the debate is done respectfully and calmly and factually and without personality, those who don't succeed are more liable to accept the outcome because they got their fair shake. They got their say. They were heard. They may not win, but they were heard. Now, let me distinguish here between discussion and debate. Discussion is a free-flowing exchange of ideas which may or may not lead to an action. You have lots of discussions in government. You have lots of discussions in most organizations. They don't necessarily lead to something being done at that time. Whereas debate is a formal process of pro and con statements about a specific proposition. In our case, we call that a motion. So it's specific to when you have a motion on the floor. So the basic rules of debate: no debate, or debate only on the immediately pending question. That is the one that's before you right now, and there may be several. All remarks are addressed to the chair. And the reason is, of course, that the chair represents everybody, and you're talking to everybody, not somebody. No one speaks without being recognized. No one speaks twice until everyone who wants to has spoken once. Nobody speaks more than twice without the approval of the assembly, and that is a suspension of the rules and requires a 2/3 vote in order to speak that third time. And no debate without a motion pending. And there are time limits which can be imposed if you have a rule that says so. Decorum during debate. Issues, not people. It's about what was said, not who said it. If you ever watch Congress or even the state legislature, they will say, you know, my distinguished colleague, the gentleman from Virginia, the gentlewoman from Ohio, whatever. This is so that they're not making it personal. And we don't want to ever make the debate personal. It's about what was said, not who said it. So we don't reuse other members' names during debate. We don't say, I disagree with Joe, or I disagree with Mary. We say, I don't like the idea that was presented, or I disagree with the statement that was made. Confine your remarks to the merits of the pending question. Don't go off on tangent. Don't attack members or members' motives. You may think you know what their motives are, but you don't. And their motives don't matter. It's what is actually said that is important. And as we said, address all remarks to the chair because you're speaking to everybody, not somebody. Okay, how is a motion handled under normal parliamentary procedure? Well, a member rises, and rises is a generic term, which means stick something up in the air and get the attention of the chair. So that can be a hand, or maybe a voting card in a convention, or in some places, maybe even stand up and go to a microphone. But the member rises. The member is recognized by the chair. Member says, I move that we do X, Y, Z. A specific action, not I think we ought to, or maybe we should, but no. I move that we do something. Someone else seconds. Seconds are not needed in committees. And if you adopt, if this is one of those things that's particular to agendas. If your motions are written out in the agenda, which there sometimes are under Brown Act bodies, then by adopting the agenda, you make the motions that are in the agenda. You don't pass them, but you make them so that when you get to them, you can skip those first 4 steps and go directly to this step. The chair states the motion. It's moved and seconded that we do X, Y, Z. Now, this is an important concept, and too many times it's left out. What this does is ensures that the chair got the motion correct. It allows the secretary a second chance to hear it and make sure it's correct. It lets the maker know that the chair heard it correctly, and it gives the body another chance to hear it. But most importantly, it transfers the ownership of the motion. It is no longer the maker's motion. It's no longer the committee's motion. It is now the body's motion, and they can do with it what they wish. Chair then asks for debate. And during debate, motions can be amended, referred, postponed, etc. And I'll go over that. Chair asks for a vote, ayes and noes, or in your case, a roll call. Chair states that the motion is adopted or not adopted. And I prefer adopted and not adopted to won or lost, because winning and losing has context. Adopted or not adopted is a factual statement. Either was adopted or it was not adopted. There is no context. And chair goes to the next business in order. Once you have adopted something, it's done, it's over with, you go on to the next thing. If there is some implementation issues, you can deal with those. But the actual motion is now done. These 3 words should never, ever be heard in any meeting whatsoever. This comes from the idea that, this is a scenario that happens frequently. There's a discussion for a while. Somebody says, well, I think we should do this. Somebody else says, I move. The chair says, okay, any objection? Okay, it's done. Well, that's not a legitimate process, because number one, you're not sure what exactly the move was, what the motion was for. Nobody stated an actual motion. There was no debate after the motion was made. Unanimous consent is okay in some circumstances, but these words should never be heard the maker of the motion must state the motion exactly as they want it considered. True or false? There can only be one motion on the floor at a time. Anybody want to take a guess? Just unmute and say true or false. Nobody? Okay.
False.
True. There can be several motions on the floor at the same time, but the body only debates and votes on one at a time. So somebody says, I move we do XYZ. Somebody else says, let's make it WXYZ. Somebody else says, let's do this next meeting. Somebody else says, let's send this to a committee. And somebody else says, let's shut up and vote. And that's what you said with all those motions. Well, all those motions are legitimately on the floor at the same time. And you would deal with them in the reverse of the order they were made. So you'd vote on stopping debate, which is previous question. Then you would vote on the referral. If the referral passes, you stop. If the referral doesn't pass, you go to the postpone. If postpone passes, then you stop. If it doesn't, you deal with the amendment. And then you deal with the main motion either as or as not amended. So you have a whole series of motions. You deal with all of them in order, but only one at a time. Okay, another one. Seconder must agree with the motion. True or false?
False.
False. True. The seconder does not have to agree with the motion. The seconder is only agreeing that the motion is worthy of being debated. And there's a little tactical maneuver that sometimes happens, and that is that somebody will second a motion knowing they have the votes to get it defeated so they can get it off the agenda. I've done that once or twice. Okay, in Robert's Rules of Order, there are 13 ranking motions. Here they are. These are on the cheat sheet that I think you're going to be given. And as you see, there's a logical order here. If you're going to amend something, maybe you don't want to postpone it. Or if you're going to refer it to the committee, why deal with the amendment, etc. So the ranking here is that each one of these takes precedence over everything below it. So once one of these motions is made, you can't make any motion below that until you deal with the motion that was made. So if you have, say, a referral on the, somebody made a motion to refer and somebody else makes a motion to lay on the table, you have to deal with table first because it takes precedent over the motion to refer. Okay, a main motion brings a new piece of business before the assembly. An assembly in this case is your city council or one of your commissions. In the city council setting, of course, most of your motions are going to come from committees or other subordinate body. So they will send you the main motions. Postpone indefinitely. This is how you get rid of something you don't want to deal with. Table is not the right motion. It's postpone indefinitely. This stops consideration of a pending question without actually voting on it. Kills it for this session. Session is the debatable term here on how long it actually stays out. Postpone indefinitely must be seconded. It is debatable and it can debate the merits of the motion. Requires a majority vote to postpone indefinitely. Okay, amend. This is how you change words in a motion. You can add or insert words. Adding, of course, is the end of a paragraph. Insert is in the middle of a paragraph. You can remove them. You can remove some and put in others. Or you can move them around. Or you can have a substitute motion. And a substitute motion is when you need to amend several things in the same paragraph, but instead of making several different motions to amend, you simply move a substitute paragraph. Or It can be, 2 or 3 paragraphs if necessary. So amendments must be seconded. Amendments are debatable. They are amendable once. You can have an amendment and an amendment to the amendment, but you can't go any farther than that. We have a different process for that called filling a blank, which I'm not going to go into tonight. If you refer the matter to committee, all the amendments that are pending, and probably all those that have been suggested but not gotten to yet, would go with the motion to the committee. And an amendment requires a majority vote, regardless of what the main motion might require. So here's an example. Here's your motion: to buy a wood leather top desk for the office. Move to insert the word red between wood and leather after comma. The idea here is you want to say specifically and exactly what it is you want to do. So here we're going to say we want a red leather top desk for the office. So we insert the word red between wood and leather. Not to exceed $500 after office. Well, both that's a legitimate motion, but you'd have to, if the red motion was made first, you would have to deal with the red motion before the not to exceed $500 motion came up, because you can't amend 2 places at the same time. But these are both examples. Germaneness. Germaneness relates to this. The amendment has to be involving the same question as the motion to which it applies. You can't add an amendment on some other subject to a motion to give the motion 2 different subjects. Amendments can be hostile and they can defeat the motion. And if in doubt, the assembly decides whether it's germane or not. Generally, the chair rules, and then the assembly can appeal it, or the chair can ask the assembly how they feel about it. Amendments must be accepted by the maker and the seconder. True or false?
False.
False. Correct. The truth is, once the amendment is stated by the chair, it belongs to the assembly. They can amend it as they wish. So the maker of the original motion has no authority, has no ability to say yes or no to any given amendment. Okay. These things do not exist. The idea of a friendly amendment is I got better wording. Well, if that comes up before the chair states the motion, then the maker can accept the new wording. Once the chair states the motion, there are no friendly amendments. Every amendment must be processed and voted on. Okay, postpone definitely. This puts it off to another day or time, usually a specific day or time. The next meeting, or 3 o'clock in this meeting, or whatever. Must be seconded. Amendment, and it can be amended as to the day and or the time, and it requires a majority vote to postpone. This is what you might do, for example, if you know there's a certain personage that needs to be here for this particular motion and they're not here yet, so you postpone it until they get there. Okay, another true or false. If somebody says, I call the question, the chair should stop debate and immediately take a vote on the main motion. Again, that's false. It's a short form of move the previous question, which is the motion to end debate, which must be seconded and it must be voted on. One person cannot control the debate. And this is something that's very important because I see it way too often. Somebody just says, I call the question, the chair stops and takes a vote. That's absolutely wrong. They have to vote on stopping debate because the body itself is in control of the debate. Okay, call the question, ends debate, proceed to vote on the pending motion. The formal motion from Roberts is I move the previous question. The language actually makes no sense. There's a long derivation about why it's in there. I'm not going to go into that. Most organizations just say, I move to end debate or I call the question. It must be seconded. It is not debatable and it is not amendable, but there are 3 forms of it. And it requires a 2/3 vote, and it's a 2/3 vote, of course, because you are changing the rights of members. Now, I said there are 3 versions. Suppose you have a motion, an amendment, and an amendment to the amendment on the floor at the same time. If you simply say, I call the question, you are only calling the question on the amendment to the amendment, the one pending motion right now. On the other hand, you could say, I call the question on the 2 amendments. That went in debate on both amendments and you'd vote on both of them, and then you'd reopen debate for the main motion. Or you can call the question on all pending questions, which means that you would vote on the secondary amendment, you'd vote on the first amendment, then you'd vote on the main motion without any more debate. So you have 3 options for calling the question. Okay, lay on the table. This is one of those things that's probably the most misused motion in the entire parliamentary lexicon. It does not kill the motion. This is to lay something aside temporarily while you do something of more importance. So you have a time-sensitive issue that you have to deal with at a particular time because it says so in the agenda. Or you have a guest speaker show up and they're tight for time, so you want to get them on. You lay something aside temporarily and come back to it when you're done. Must be seconded. It's not debatable, although the explanation of why you need to lay it on the table can be given. It's not amendable. It requires a majority vote, and you have to vote to take it from the table, but that is generally done by general consent. Okay, appeal from the decision of the chair. The chair is not God. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, but that's the way it is.
Darn it.
Causes the ruling of the chair to be decided by the assembly, in this case by the council, or even by one of the commissions. It must be seconded. It may be debatable, and I'll talk about that in a sec. A majority in the negative to overturn the chair. This is one of only 1 or 2 cases in Roberts where the negative is more important than the affirmative. Okay, so how does this work? Well, a member gets recognized and says, I appeal the ruling of the chair. Another member says, I second, no recognition necessary. Chair says, the ruling of the chair has been appealed. The chair made the appeal because, and states why they made the ruling that way. The member may state the reason for the appeal. The member then gives the reason for the appeal. If it's debatable, that's when debate would come in. And here's the rule on debatability. If the ruling is made on a motion that is debatable, then the appeal is debatable. If the appeal is made on a motion, on a ruling on a motion that is not appealable, not debatable, then the appeal is not debatable. So if you can debate the original motion, you can debate the appeal. If you can't debate the original motion, you can't debate the appeal. Okay, so then the chair says, all those who would uphold the ruling of the chair say aye. Notice we're putting this in the affirmative. All those who would uphold the ruling of the chair say aye. Pause. Actually, this will be done by roll call in a city council. All those who would overturn the ruling of the chair say no. If there is a affirmative vote or a tie, the chair wins, the chair is upheld. If there's a majority in the negative, then the chair is overturned and you take some corrective action. So the ayes have it, the ruling is upheld, or the noes have it and the ruling is overturned. We will do whatever is appropriate at that moment. Okay, reconsider. to bring back for consideration a motion that has been finally disposed of. Finally disposed of is a term we use to mean that you finished with that motion. It's done and over with. You voted on it and it's either passed or failed. Must be made by someone who voted on the prevailing side, that is the side that won. So if it passed, somebody who voted yes. If it failed, somebody who voted no. In a committee, anyone can move reconsideration. Majority vote to grant reconsideration. Now, this is only to grant the reconsideration. It does not have, it does not pass the motion itself. It only grants the reconsideration. Consideration may be postponed to another meeting. This is one of those issues where the Brown Act may intervene here. But you can do that anyway, whether the Brown Act intervenes or not. You may have to in some circumstances because of the Brown Act. And it stops any action being taken until the new consideration is held. So if you adopt it at this time, then you move to reconsider and bring it up at the next meeting, no action can be taken between the two meetings. Okay, point of order. Point of order is used to call attention to the chair to a possible procedure or parliamentary fault. They did something wrong. No second is required and no vote is taken. The chair decides if the point is valid or what we call well taken, and corrective action is then taken, or it's not well taken, and if so, then the decision can be appealed to the body as a whole. Okay, let's talk more specifically about the Brown Act and how it affects Robert's rules. It really doesn't have a significant impact on the general process of debating and voting and amending and all that stuff, but it does affect certain things. RO&R is the abbreviation of Robert's Rules of Order newly revised. It will affect quorum. It will, because of notice requirements. It basically bans new business. Public comment is required. It affects voting and it affects your minutes, and I'll go over those in order. First off, quorum. As we know, a quorum is the number of members who must be present in order to legally conduct business. Generally, that is a majority unless the bylaws specify a different number or percentage, but that's not acceptable under the Brown Act. Also, for general associations, the California Corporation Code specifies 1/3 or 1/5 for membership meetings and 1/3 for board meetings. But again, that doesn't apply because of the Brown Act. Under the Brown Act, it must be a majority. Things require notice, at least 72 hours in advance of regular meetings. Description of each agenda item, generally not to exceed 20 words. Posted in an accessible place, plus on the website. Creates a scope of notice for all agenda items, and I'll cover that in just a sec. Items not on agenda can only be discussed in limited circumstances such as emergencies, and again, I'll talk about that in a sec. Let's look at scope of notice. The scope of notice is the parameters of allowed amendments from the floor based on the required notice. It is between the existing condition and the proposed condition. So I'm going to use a simple one for an example that doesn't apply to you. Well, it does apply a little. So a motion to increase the fee for building permits from $50 to $100. Proposed amendment to add, well, we'll do that too. Proposed amendment to add members to a board or commission. Chair rules if something is within scope, but that ruling is appealable. Now, scope of notice. Your permits are $50. You want to raise them to $100. So somebody makes a motion for $60. Well, that's between the two, so that's fine. You can make a motion for $60. You could also make one for $95. an amendment from the floor. That's acceptable. However, a motion for 40 is outside of the scope, therefore not acceptable, as would be a motion for 120. So the scope of notice is between the existing condition and the proposed condition. Obviously, when dealing with numbers, that's really easy. When dealing with verbiage, not so easy. So you may have to decide whether something is within scope or not. And as I said, that's an appealable decision, or the chair can actually ask the body what they think about it. Okay, new business. This is stuff that you didn't know was going to come up. It's not allowed under the Brown Act except for emergencies or brief statements. Emergency must either be an actual emergency. I mean, we do live in earthquake country after all. And there's a statutory definition of what emergency is. And it's something on which you need to take immediate action, and the need arose after the agenda was posted. So it has to meet those two criteria or be a statutory emergency. Members can make instructions to staff, briefly respond to public comments, and make brief announcements and reports of members' own activities as new business. But those cannot be items that the council needs to take action on at that meeting. Public comment required under the Brown Act. It is comment, not dialogue. Should not engage in a dialogue with the public. Questions of a factual nature can be asked in certain circumstances, but you need to apply that carefully. An example that I've seen a couple of times is a member says, well, I oppose this project because it will block my view. It is okay to say, okay, how much of your view will be blocked and how will it be blocked? But you should not get into a dialogue about whether that's a good thing or not thing, just bad thing, just how much. Non-agenda topics at the beginning or the end of meeting for public comment, and agenda topics as each one is brought up. Generally, the process is you have a staff or committee report. You get factual questions for the staff and committee. Then you have public comment, and then the assembly debates and votes. Way back when this first came in, they would take the public comment after the assembly had had its discussion. And many people complained that means we're not affecting the vote, we're not affecting what the council is doing, and public comment is irrelevant. So most bodies have now adopted this process where the public comment is taken before the assembly itself debates and votes. Decorum for public comment. Members of the public can say whatever they really want to. Council members may not engage with public during comment except for those factual questions. And you should never deride or degrade members of the public or use harassing or bullying language with members of the public, just as you would not do that with each other. I'm reminded of an anecdote from the LA City Council. The late, great John Ferraro, who was president of the LA City Council for about 20 years. He was 6'6", an ex-USC linebacker. The LA City Council, as you may know, meets 3 times a week. We have a standing city council, full-time city council. And at every meeting, there are these gadflies who come and rant and rave and scream and yell about, anything and everything. And nobody ever pays attention to them. So at one of these meetings, one of these gadflies was ranting and raving as usual and noticed that nobody was paying attention. So he started ranting and raving about the fact that people weren't paying attention. So Ferraro is talking on the phone to somebody. So he puts down his phone, turns to the man and says, "The Brown Act requires us to allow you to speak. It does not require us to listen." Now, I've been told that in fact you do have to listen, but I thought that was an interesting thing that happened. Okay, effects on meeting conduct, of course, public comments on agenda items No business without a quorum. So if somebody, I've seen this happen too, somebody steps out to go to the bathroom, you stop while the person's not in the room because it breaks your quorum. Scope of notice, amendments must not be outside of scope. And of course, there are voting restrictions. Voting under the Brown Act requires each member's vote to be recorded by name. Therefore, there's only two methods of voting. One is unanimous consent, where everybody says, okay, fine. Because unanimous, of course, everybody voted yes. Or a roll call vote, and you know how to do roll call votes. Electronic votes are treated as roll call votes. So if you end up using a keypad or you have an electronic system installed in your council chamber, then that counts as a roll call vote. So a general consent is, the chair says, are there any objections to, or without objection, we will do XYZ, whatever it is. If no one objects, the chair says adopted without objection. If someone objects, then you take a roll call. This is one of those cases where silence not only implies consent, silence is consent. If you do not say, I object, then you are agreeing to the motion. And then a roll call vote at the instructions of the chair, clerk calls the roll of members. Each member replies, I know or abstain, and a clerk announces the vote result. Now, let me talk for a second about abstentions. Abstentions are not a vote. They do not count, ever. I'll say that again. Abstentions are not votes. They do not count, ever. It's not a statement vote. It's not a protest vote. It's just not a vote. And in normal circumstances, you don't even ask for abstentions. However, in a body that has a requirement of a majority of those present to adopt a motion, which City Council does, an abstention has the same effect as a negative vote, but it's not a vote and it doesn't count. But it has the same effect as a negative vote. This is where the idea that some people have that abstentions are negative votes comes from. They're not really, but in some specific circumstances, they have the same effect. Minutes. So let's go. Minutes are a record of actions taken. Motions, actions are motions that you adopt or resolutions that you adopt. Statements made in debate are not actions. They're just statements. How much of that you include in the minutes is a legal issue, and I'll leave that to your city attorney on how much has to be in there or what has to be in there. But there is no requirement that what is said in debate enters into the city record, enters into the minutes. I advise most non-governmental bodies that I deal with to put as little as possible of the debate in the minutes and never apply anybody's name to what is said, because minutes are a discoverable document and that could lead to all sorts of problems. If you want that, summarize what was said in the debate, but don't put anybody's name on it. Okay, that's the end of my prepared remarks. This is to remind us that this is a tool, this is a process, and you got to learn to use it properly.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart, and I'm sure that we have some questions down in the bottom.
Okay. Yeah, we do. We have a few here. Okay. Is the 2/3 vote of total membership or the voting members that are present at a particular meeting? In general, votes are always a majority or 2/3 of the votes cast. Abstentions are not votes. They don't count. However, in the Brown Act, that may be a little different. And I'll leave that to your city attorney to tell you.
So Mr. Stewart, I can weigh in a little bit on that. So
Okay.
there are some types of actions under California state law that do require a majority of the membership rather than a majority of the quorum present. So it depends on the type of action, whether there's a specific law that applies.
Okay,
Thank you.
great, thank you. Is it recommended not to use a member's name during the whole meeting or only during debate? Generally only during debate. There are, of course, many legitimate times when you need to call on somebody by name. You need to have the name of the people who made motions and that kind of thing. So generally, it's only during the debate process, or if the discussion is getting a little too heavy, then you wouldn't use names. What if a member of the public during their comment says something derogatory like a slur or calls for negative action such as harassment or violence? Is it allowed within the power of the chair or body to address what was said? Mr. City Attorney, would you like to take that one?
I would say that on that one, I have seen presiding officers address issues of decorum in a non-confrontational manner and remind the member of the public that decorum is expected of the public as well as of the members of the body.
Can I follow up for the city manager? Mr. City Manager, if a public member comes in and chastises a council member to a degree that's offensive and so forth, the chair has the opportunity then to call that chair to that public member, correct?
So one thing to qualify all of this on is that the law is clear that members of the public can criticize members of the body, but if we're getting
derogatory language, that's not, in the best interest of the community.
Correct. Certainly, statements like that can be made. However, you cannot prohibit criticism of the elected officials.
In other words, bad words. Okay, thank you.
If they come up and want to sing a song, you got to let them. I've seen that happen. I can't believe it. Steve, have they got the parliamentary cheat sheet yet?
No, they have not. We were planning on laminating that and providing it to them directly.
Okay. You'll get a parliamentary cheat sheet that looks something like this, two-sided. It's a summary of the motion, the ranking motions and other motions, and whether they require a second, whether they're debatable, amendable, what vote it takes, et cetera, et cetera. A very useful thing to have. Is there any other questions?
Mr. Stewart, I was looking at slide 44. It says the chair asked, are there any objections? Without objections, then the chair says that item is adopted. That means no roll call? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, effectively, that's what it means. The reason being, of course, if there's no objection, everybody voted yes. So a roll call is irrelevant at that point.
So then how is that recorded on the clerk, by the clerk? There was just no objection?
The clerk says no objection, or they can put, yes by everybody's name. However you want to do that.
Okay.
But the idea is without objection means everybody agreed.
And commissioners and council members, any additional questions for Mr. Stewart? Or our city attorney or city manager?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a quick question. Mr. Stewart, if you could clarify for us a little bit further, in your presentation, you discussed in a few places the difference between what has to occur at committee versus at the full board meeting.
Committee rules, because committees are designed to go much deeper into something. The rules on debate, for example, are softer, and seconds are not necessarily necessary. I mean, you can make a rule to have seconds if you want them, but generally they're not. In some committees, for example, they will say, we won't have a motion to end debate. We'll debate it as long as we think we need to. Those are the kind of things that committees can do because they are designed to really go through issues in graphic detail and in minute detail to come up with an end result. So the formality of Roberts doesn't help that much, although the process helps. I tell folks that the formality of Robert's rules is a tool for maintaining control. And when you don't need them control, then you don't need the formality either. So does that help?
Very much. Thank you.
Okay, then there's another one in the chat box about reconsider. Is there a specific time for that option before it's too late? Yes, there is. Generally, you have to move reconsideration in the same meeting at which the motion you want to have reconsidered took place. The option to that, the codicil to that is if a motion was adopted, but nothing has happened with it, nothing, and no action has been taken by the next meeting, then you can still reconsider at the next meeting, although that's not really terribly advisable. It should only be done in the same meeting at which the motion you want to reconsider was adopted or defeated.
Yeah, Mr.
Okay.
Stewart.
Yes.
On slide 35, for at least 72 hours in advance are required for a regular meeting. And there's also, for the public's sake, there's also so many hours for a special meeting, right?
I believe so. I'll leave that one to the city attorney.
So, Mayor, of course, in Oxnard, we've got our sunshine ordinance that the council adopted some time ago that increases those minimum time limits that the Brown Act sets. So we go above and beyond that quite a bit. So special meetings, we aim for 7 days ahead of the meeting date for council meetings. And the council regular meetings, we post that agenda 12 days in advance.
Oh, okay.
So those are set by law, but they've been modified locally here. And that kind of leads me to a question for further discussion about maybe some more discussion about special rules of orders or bylaws. Mr. Stewart, I had shared with you when we first started getting into this project, the council's procedures manual that they have had adopted for the last several years, and they modify it. We aim for every 2 years, and it's due for an update now. And I guess if you could talk some more about the interplay of something like that, whether that qualifies as a special rule of order, or how you would, having looked at it, how you would treat that.
Yeah, well, a special rule of order in our definition is anything that supersedes the parliamentary authority, or some other authority that you have to deal with. In the case of that kind of a set of rules, you could consider the whole thing a set of special rules of order, because you are setting up your own kind of effectively parliamentary authority that's in addition to Robert's rules or whatever else other one you're going to use. There has been a trend for the last, 10 or 15 years to get away from the term special rule of order and instead call them policies. And I'm not as concerned about the title as I am about what they do and how they are adopted. Anytime you do something that supersedes the parliamentary authority, it requires a 2/3 vote. So whether you call it a special rule or a standing rule or a policy, it still requires a 2/3 vote if it supersedes the parliamentary authority or some other authority that you have to deal with.
Okay, thank you. And we have a question by Chairman Chavez, followed by Councilmember Tehran.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Stewart, for the presentation. Just a couple of questions, and I felt it would probably better do a voice as opposed to typing it all out. Can you elaborate a little bit more in regards to Robert's rules and the Brown Act in regards to the voting? So this is kind of piggybacking off of the mayor's comments in regards to the no objection votes. How that plays with Robert's rules, not Robert's, but the Brown Act in regards to the type of voting procedures that we take, especially right now during teleconferencing, where we're pretty much expected to take roll call votes.
Yeah. I know that at least in LA City and County, the city attorney, county council have said for the purposes of online meetings that you need to do roll call votes for everything. Oftentimes it's something that is, purely a procedural motion. For example, adopting minutes or something like that may be done with general consent or unanimous consent. But it's a little iffy. When you're face to face, it's much better because then you're seeing everybody's reaction and everybody has a better opportunity to get in. I mean, my advice would be that as long as you're virtual, do roll calls, and reserve the general consent for those things which are, I don't want to say insignificant, but where there's no opposition.
Thank you for that. And are we, because I chair the planning commission, are we allowed to take certain things out of order? Like say we wanted to hear public comment before staff presentations or commissioner comments, or does it have to follow a specific order? You can set up whatever order you want. There is no set order as far as I know. City attorney can weigh in if there is. That's probably going to be one of those things you're going to set in your own rule book as to what order you do that in. There may be circumstances again where you want to do it differently for a particular issue because there's reasons to do that for that issue. That's why you have the flexibility to set it however you want and to amend whatever your rule is by a 2/3 for that particular meeting or that particular subject.
So to add a little bit to that, do you ask the majority of the board to agree with that, to take out of order?
It requires a 2/3.
2/3.
2/3 to take it out of order.
Okay.
So if I could weigh in on that as well. So
Sure.
You can change the order of things within a certain level, but if you've got, let's say, a public hearing that's been noticed for a specific hour, you can't change the agenda in a manner that would put that before the time that's been noticed to the public. So at some point you run into a due process issue. If people were expecting the matter wouldn't be heard before 7 o'clock and you change the order to take it at 6:30, you've got a problem and you can't do that.
It's a time certain.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Attorney, City Attorney. I guess it was just more in the sense of if we're dealing with a particular action item and, if there's a lot of speakers from the public, have them speak and then go into commissioner comments and staff responses. But that's just what I was curious about. And the final question in one of your slides, you had listed that the chair or whoever's leading the meeting will announce that the item has been moved and seconded, not necessarily listing the names.
Right.
Is that a recommendation or is that a guide to follow?
That's a standard step in putting the motion forth because again, when you do that, it changes the ownership from the person or body that made it to your body to take action, and they now own it. They can do what they want with it. So that is a very necessary step.
And after the motion is made, a debate is called for, correct?
Right.
Yeah. And if there's no debate on it, it'll automatically go to the vote.
Yeah, you generally what the chair says, well, we're hearing no debate. If there's no objections, we'll take a vote now.
And there's no time limit on the debate, correct? It can go pretty much.
That's according to your own rules. I mean, the default in Roberts is 10 minutes per person. But said,
You go to a body of 300, 10 minutes per person, do the math.
And I'm sure that the chair can also is probably
Yeah.
control that.
Yeah, and the recommendation is 2 minutes or 3 minutes is normal.
Right.
And what I tell people, if you can't figure out what you need to say in 3 minutes, then you need to think some more.
I appreciate that, Mr. Stewart. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And also now we have a Councilmember Turan followed by Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Turan.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Stewart, for the presentation and the training. I just have two questions. One is a follow-up to one that was just asked. And in regards to the question about reconsidering, I think it was a great question. Is there a specific time limit on that? And correct me if I interpreted this incorrectly, but it sounded like you have until the adjournment of that meeting to reconsider the item. Is that correct?
You have until the adjournment of that meeting to move the reconsideration. It doesn't have to be acted on at that meeting. Simply moving it stops any action from being taken, and you can take up the reconsideration at the next meeting. But yeah, you have until the end of that particular meeting to move the reconsideration.
Okay, and the reason I ask that is because, I look at our info consent agenda from earlier. Let's say hypothetically that I wanted to reconsider the amendment to the agreement that we had on there. And we already voted, it's a done deal. The meeting is not over yet. And here we are at 8 o'clock at night and I motion to reconsider it. The reason I asked that is it was an item that was publicly noticed. It came up on the agenda. The public had an opportunity to comment. They saw deliberation amongst the body, and then the vote happened. So reconsidering later is the recommendation that it be done at a different time so it could be noticed, so that it's not revisited after the public's already left the meeting or no longer seeing the item they had interest in.
Yeah. Well, yeah. First off, just let me correct one thing, which is really a personal bugaboo. You don't motion, you move.
Okay.
Thank you,
move
sir.
to do something. You don't motion to do something. Whether or not you reconsider at that meeting or at the next meeting, according to the Brown Act, is not a clear situation. And I would, again, that's one of those that I'm going to defer to your city attorney on, about whether you do or do not have to put it off till the next meeting, or whether you can, in fact, redo it at the same meeting.
But you mentioned that you got to be on the winning side in order to reconsider.
Yeah, you got to be on the prevailing side in order to reconsider. Now, again, one of those little tactic things.
Right.
If you know you want to reconsider it and put it off to the next meeting, you vote on the side you think is going to win, so you can make the motion to reconsider. I've done that too. I mean, there's tactical things you can do here with Robert's rules.
And that's important to understand, that you have to be on the prevailing side.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And my second question on slide 12 regarding handling motions. And my apologies if this is kind of a silly question, but the first bullet point says member rises. Is this simply stating that they are asking to be recognized by the presiding officer? They're not physically standing up and rising from their seat at the dais.
The only silly question is the one you do not ask.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, rises is a generic term which means get the attention of the chair. Because you have to remember, this thing was written in the 1867. And that's when people actually stood up in meetings and did stuff. It's, hand up in the air or electronic button, whatever the recognition system is, rises a generic term which means get recognition.
Thank you very much. And I'll just share that I have a stand-up desk here when we're doing our virtual meetings, so I'm good on that. But thank you, Mr. Stewart. I appreciate it.
Well, then you have to sit down to get attention.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, actually, my concern was answered. I wasn't sure if I heard it or not, but on the consideration to reconsider, or the move to reconsider, you mentioned it has to be on a prevailing party from the first vote. And so that was my concern. Otherwise, we'd be there all night reconsidering stuff.
Right. And that's exactly why it is somebody on the prevailing side, is to prevent it from being just continually reconsidered.
Mr. City Manager has a question.
Yes, Mr. Stewart.
Yes.
Further clarification. So if a member asks for the reconsideration and then it gets continued to the following meeting, that means the action that had been taken is now void, correct?
Correct. It's as if it never occurred, and you start from scratch at the new reconsider, or when you reconsider the motion, you basically start from scratch.
It's a de novo, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So and no action gets taken in the meantime.
Okay, so I'm council members, commissioners. Any other questions? Mr. Stewart did an excellent job.
Thank you.
Mr. City Manager.
You have two more people.
Oh,
with
two more.
raised hands.
Yeah.
Okay, we have. You can see the names up. Madrigal and I'm sorry, the Arguello. Okay. And then Madrigal. Commissioner.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Zaragoza. Hello,
My
Mr.
apologies, I can't see your name from here. So
Yeah, Commissioner Arguello, no problem at all,
Thank you.
Mayor.
Thank
You, Mr. Stewart. I'm actually going to defer this to my fellow Commissioner Lopez. He had a question in the chat, and I just wanted to make sure it wasn't missed.
Okay.
Commissioner Lopez.
Thank you.
That was, yeah.
Yeah, so the question was a follow-up to City Manager's question about the differentiation between process for the council or a committee. So I was just wondering, for clarification, would our citizen advisory groups like the Planning Commission follow or be expected to follow the committee precedent, or do we follow the full board council vote process?
I would say they would probably do better following committee process, but not having seen one actually take place, I don't know. As I said, the formality is a tool to maintain control of the meeting. And I mean, I've had meetings which we've started off being rather loose about the formality, and as things get out of hand, we put in more and more formality until we're going very strictly by the rules in order to maintain control. So my advice is exercise the amount of control you think you need to have.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Madrigal.
Actually, I had the same thing. It was just to answer Commissioner Lopez's question.
Okay. Any additional questions, council members, commissioners? Okay, City Attorney.
Well, since we're out of questions, maybe we could have a little discussion. We had discussed this, Mr. Stewart, prior to the meeting, the various nuances to adjournment of a meeting.
Oh, yeah. Okay, sure. There are three ways to adjourn a meeting. The first is somebody makes a motion, it is seconded, it is voted on, and you adjourn. Now that usually happens really fast. Like I move to adjourn, second, any objection is done. The second way is that you have what we call a hard time out. That is, you have a specific time at which you have to adjourn, usually in an adopted agenda. I often face it in organizations that are meeting at some hotel and they have to be out of a room at a certain time.
Mm-hmm.
When that happens, the chair simply says the time for adjournment has been reached and pauses for somebody, a second for somebody to move to extend, and they said, we are adjourned. The other is if, you run out of business. It's like, when does that ever happen? And then the chair can simply say, if there is no further business, pause for a second, we are adjourned. So you have three ways, either a motion, a hard timeout, or you run out of business.
So, Mr. Stewart, you said that's the last item on the agenda. We're adjourned.
Yeah.
Okay. All righty. Any? Okay, we have Commissioner Chavez and then Councilmember Perello.
Thank you, Mayor. Just real quick on that, Mr. Stewart. It doesn't happen to the Planning Commission, but in regards to the City Council, there is a policy in place as a time limit, and then they have to vote on extending it.
Yes.
In that instance, if they're in that extended window, would they require to have that first option of the motion, the second, and the vote on?
No, if they extend and then one of the other two happens, you can do those, or there can be a motion. If you move to, well, I was just in a meeting this morning, that started at 6 a.m. That they moved to extend the meeting an hour. They only needed 45 minutes of that hour. Somebody says, okay, we're done, let's adjourn. Everybody said yes, and they adjourned. So
Okay.
it's actually that easy. Even if you extend for an hour, you don't have to use up the time.
Now, I didn't hear an option for the chair to ultimately have all the power just to say that we're adjourned. Is that not an option?
Chair does not have that power. The chair cannot adjourn the meeting on their own, except in the case of a hard timeout where you really do have to stop at a particular time.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Mhm.
Okay.
And when can the chair use the gavel?
Well, that depends on what kind of gavel you have.
Thank you. Thank you.
When properly used, the gavel opens and closes the meeting and should not be used in between.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councilmember Perello, followed by Councilmember Turan.
Yes, Mr. Stewart, thank you very much for the presentation. If the meeting is going, you're not ready to adjourn, but all of a sudden someone gets a call and that breaks the quorum, that's another way of adjourning the meeting, correct? You'd have to stop the meeting.
That's a temporary break. That's a recess. If that happens and you think the person's going to come back, I would simply say, okay, we'll be recessed until the member returns.
If the person gets a call from the family and they have to leave, and they're not paying to come back, would you adjourn?
With the Brown Act, if you lose the quorum, you must, and you're not going to regain it, then you must adjourn. I use the example of the person who went off to the bathroom. They just stopped until the person came back. Same thing with.
Thank you very much. Good meeting.
Thank you, Councilmember Turan.
Thank you. Actually, my question was very similar to that. I was just wondering if the procedure for a recess is similar to the procedure for adjournment, where there needs to be either somebody makes a motion to do so, they move to do that, or if the presiding officer could say, we're going to take a recess for 5 minutes.
Well, first off, if it's built into the agenda, so you have, a recess at a specific time, then you can call that recess. Or someone can make a motion to recess, or the chair can suggest a recess, and that and it can be voted on that way. That's one of the motions the chair can make, is to suggest a recess. That's actually probably not in the city council meeting, but in some others I've seen, that is an excellent way to kind of stop things which are getting hot. The chair will ask, if there's no objection, we'll take a recess for 10 minutes, and that allows everybody a chance to cool off.
Okay.
And the chair has some authority there, but again, can be overridden by the body.
I think we have a question in the chat there. I'm sorry, but Councilmember Turan, additional information?
No, Mayor, I was just saying thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, who will be the enforcer of parliamentary rules for the city council and planning commission meetings? I'll leave that to your city attorney, unless you're going to hire me permanently. Mr. City Attorney?
Well, we can certainly try to field parliamentary questions. However, I think that the procedures for appeal that you went over do carry some weight.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there are absolute answers legally, given how Robert's Rules of Order is set up.
Right.
If those rules of appeal are followed and the assembly chooses to do something by the required vote.
Yeah. In general, it is the chair who is supposed to maintain the order and maintain Robert's rules. Again, that can be overridden by the body.
So
Okay.
since we do have a little more time, maybe we could go over also the question that frequently comes up about what is appropriate for the presiding officer to do by way of participation in a meeting other than being the presiding officer.
In a normal organization, not a governmental body, the chair is a facilitator of the meeting and should not participate in debate, only votes when it matters, generally, or in a ballot vote or a roll call vote at the end. However, in a body that is elected folks, like yourselves, you represent a constituency. And if the chair is not able to participate, then that constituency is not being properly represented. So I say that in an elected body, the chair has more leeway to debate, more leeway, and should of course vote on every motion, but has more leeway to enter into debate than they would in a regular assembly. But it's a matter of maintaining neutrality in the way you run the meeting. For example, one of the meetings I do with an elected body, they will have a speakers list. The chair will put themselves on the speakers list just like everybody else. So they take their turn in line with everybody else. So in that case, they're not pulling rank on anybody, and the chair should not do that. If you keep an order of speaking, the chair should go in the same order as everybody else.
And thank you. Normally, Mr. Stewart, I'd like to allow, the council members to speak first and give their opinions and so forth. And potentially I can also give my opinion and vote accordingly.
That's a good way to do it.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Chavez, chairperson.
Since we're trying to fill time, I got a couple more questions. In regards to the chair's role, and I was just recently selected as the chair of our commission, and I appreciate that.
My condolences.
I think we heard that from the mayor pro tem on the last meeting.
I think that's what the usual response is. But I'm very curious in regards to the chair, their role. I understand. So this is two parts to this question. Number one, you had in your slides that a point of order can be done against the chair. Is there a point of order that's just general, like, one of the members, not necessarily towards the chair, but just in general of the meeting?
Yeah, the point of order is to call attention to any kind of procedural parliamentary fault. Doesn't matter who made the fault.
Okay.
So if someone is speaking out of turn, that's a point of order. If someone is making a motion who's not supposed to be making a motion, that's a point of order. It's anything that violates the rules.
Okay.
Can I add a little bit to that just for clarification? For example, if we talking about a specific agenda item, and then that person gets out of talking about something else, then you can then he's out of order. Thank you.
Well, correction. The remarks are out of order. The person is not out of order.
The remarks
are out of order. Again, not personal.
And just a final one in regards to the chair. I know you said that everybody has to be recognized by the chair to be able to speak. Is the chair at any point, or presiding officer at any point, allowed to interrupt a member of that body during their comments?
Yes, if they are not germane to the topic, if they're not speaking to the topic, they're getting off on a tangent, or they introduce some concept that is not part of the motion. Basically, anytime they get off topic, you
but
can call them.
But the chair technically can't go in there and start asking questions.
No.
On top of.
No, but the chair can say, "Excuse me, but you're off topic. Would you please get back on the subject matter?"
Okay, I appreciate that, Mr. Stewart. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Conley.
Thank you. Kind of following what Commissioner Chavez said and asked. So if in a meeting we noticed that not everyone had a chance to speak, or somebody already had their 2 chances to speak, would that be then the time to call point of order?
Yes.
And
Yes,
then
it would.
is the chair included in that? So can the chair
Yes.
so it would be person A, B, and C, and then person A talks, then chair can chime in, or they would be A, B, C, and then chair would be D?
The chair should take their rightful turn wherever that happens to be. And that's a matter of how you keep track of who's going to speak next. If it's just, you stick up hands and the chair chooses somebody, then the chair can basically put it in wherever they want. Most of the organizations I deal with maintain some kind of a speakers list. And the chair then puts themselves on the list along with everybody else.
Perfect. Thank you for the clarification.
So that way everybody has the opportunity to participate.
Yeah, everybody has the same rights to participate.
Mhm. Commissioner Conley, have other questions? Okay, thank you. Any additional questions of Commissioner Nash?
And thank you. Not a question so much as just the responsibility of the chairperson or the mayor or the president of the board to promptly recognize the individuals who have their hand raised function flagged as long as we're doing these Zoom meetings. I've attended some Zoom meetings where the raised hand tends to be ignored for whatever reasons. So just a comment. And I know you're good at it, Mayor.
Yeah. I have been in some meetings, Zoom meetings that have over 100 folks in them, and in those cases, you assign somebody specifically to watch the list and be sure it stays in order, and tell the president who to call on next.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Boy, I think we were learned pretty quick. We're good learners.
Yeah, either I dazzled you or I baffled you. I'm not sure which.
But I had one of the, I was just talking to our city. No, we don't have to. Okay, so any other, let me see. Rejo. Commissioner?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I wanted, since the questions are done, I just wanted to do a general follow-up and ask if Mr. Stewart is going to be doing any other more detailed dive presentations in regards to Robert's rules, not just for the City Council and the Planning Commission again, but also for the other CAGs.
For the CAGs.
Yes, I just wanted to know any future educational sessions that we might have from Mr. Stewart, if that's planned by the city attorney.
That's a good question, Mr. City Attorney.
So this is the first training for the council and the planning commission. There will be subsequent trainings for the other CAGs, and we're still considering how to group them. I don't know that we're going to do each CAG having its own separate training. We'll probably do something similar to this where we get a group of the CAGs together on a Zoom call. So it's somewhat manageable since we've had a lot of questions and participation. But if we had too many people, that would be probably detrimental to have a group that size.
Yeah, I also find that if you have, just 5 or 6 or 7 people, it's not as effective as you have 15, 20, 30, because you don't get the questions then.
And we might begin by having them watch the video of this meeting.
That's a good.
There you go.
Commissioner, that's a good question. That we do have to, share with all the other CAGs that we have here in the city. Anything else? If not, we're going to follow the rules of order. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Council members?
I'll move to adjourn.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'll second that motion.
Okay, Tehran, Mr. Councilman Tehran and Mayor Pro Tem second. Okay, roll call.
Councilmember Lopez,
Aye.
Councilmember Basua,
Aye.
Councilmember Turan,
Yes.
Mayor Zaragoza,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem McDonald,
Aye.
Councilmember Perrello,
Aye.
Councilmember Madrigal.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0.
And commissioners and council members, thank you for participating. And Mr. Stewart, excellent presentation. And
Thank you.
we do have your parliamentary procedure manual here, the cheat
Yep.
sheet that you gave us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And
don't
and
do
we are
anything.
adjourned.
Don't do anything you can't get away with.
Thank you. Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
I'll take care.
Thank you.